So thanks for joining, everyone. So today we're going to discuss a fundamental, I would say, idea that I have about listening, and that idea is that you should choose regularly how you listen. And when we think about the four filters of listening, I think that reinforces this idea of choice by saying, here are your options. Each one offers something different. And they also inform that you should be knowledgeable in your choices. So today we're going to explore that idea and discuss how to choose well. Um, and one of the ideas I'm especially interested in is how to choose repeatedly as a musician and as a listener. So joined by Patrick Summers, a professor at Southern Utah University, and Stephen, who does marketing. Uh, but Stephen is a very prolific listener, um, knows what he's talking about, just like Rufus from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So the first question that I wanted to lead out with today is, have there been any settings where you felt like you didn't have a choice in how you listened to music? Does anyone want to jump on that one?
I'll
I
just go
can.
ahead and say that I'm not sure this question is for me. I have thoughts, but if Stephen, if you have something, take it.
Yeah, I had trouble coming up with a single instance where I didn't feel like I had a choice in how I listen. The only thing I could come up with were instances in which I did not have choice in what I was listening to, um, which I think is telling to some of our sort of, at least, I don't know, predispositions toward music generally, at least my predispositions toward music, how empowering it is to be able to choose, oh, this is my music. I want to listen to it. And, I've talked with friends before who feel a sense of pride and attachment to music because they chose this music. This is music they discovered, they fell in love with. It's not their parents' music. It's not their friends' music. It's theirs. The only times I can think of when I didn't feel that I had a choice were times when I was listening to someone else's music it didn't want to be. I'll give you an example. If either of you have ever heard the song The Floor is Lava, it's horrible. Um, Anything that's inspired by Pop Goes the Weasel, it's probably going to be bad anyway, if that's the starting point. So yeah, it's like it's a bit like Chinese water torture from music. It's like not like a drop of water is not bad. The chord progression in Pop Goes the Weasel isn't bad, but when that's all you get and it's pulled out so slowly, I love minimalism, but this stripped my choice away. And so that it's only in instances like that where I'm subjected to this commercialized music that is meant to get your kids money, which is not what I wanted to listen to. Those are the only instances I can come up with in my life where I haven't felt like I actually had some sort of choice in how I listen.
So I'm curious. Perhaps this is more reflective of my experience, because there have been a few situations where I felt like maybe it wasn't that I didn't have a choice, but I had a lot of trouble making a choice to listen differently. And here was one of my experiences as a undergraduate. I had to play a Chopin ballade from memory, and I hate playing from memory. It's one of my biggest weaknesses as a pianist. And uh, I remember going up to play it in front of like all these musicians, and I was like, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever done." And it was just this really intense experience. I loved the piece. I knew it. I loved listening to it, but I felt like all I could do was think about it in a really specific way to make sure it didn't fall apart, because I was playing using a skill that I wasn't comfortable with. And so in that moment, I felt like I really didn't have a choice other than survival. And I don't think I'm alone as a performing artist in having those kinds of experience where it's like, well, this is what I got to do. I have to play with as few mistakes as possible. I got to get this done. And so I don't know. Does that spark any more thoughts of like being restricted in your listening?
I felt like it was a fight for survival, listening to The Floor Is Lava. Um, but no, but I think there's something to that. Like if you go in with a chip on your shoulder of any sort, if you go in with again a predisposition how you're going to listen, I think that of course, uh, whether artificially or organically in some other way, will restrict your experience. You know,
Now,
if you've
William,
already
did you feel
decided
like
I don't want to listen.
William, did you feel like that you were? Can you hear me?
I think if you could switch your
Oh,
mic around.
it did. This is ridiculous.
Your computer is
Let me
making
leave
your
and come back.
choices for you.
Serious. This is terrible. I hate it. Let me. It says that I can't switch my microphone unless I leave and come back in. Is that going to interrupt the recording? Can I re-enter
That should
as
be
you're
fine.
recording? Okay. Let me test it. Make sure. I'll be back in 1 sec.
Patrick has departed. But
Where did you dig up this old fossil?
oh man, computer problems. But I really did like your point that you can, I think, restrict your listening before the fact through your approach. If you choose that a performance means something or that it needs to be done a certain way, I think, yeah, you can get yourself in trouble in the moment. I think that is a common occurrence when it comes to performance, that people have decided what they need out of their performance, and then they do restrict their listening based on something they did before they even
I'm
got
back.
there.
Can you hear me okay now?
But
Okay,
Patrick,
perfect.
you had a thought.
That was my question was that
Yeah.
so did you approach that like criticism of yourself or like of the situation or like your observation of it? Was that because you had to listen to the piece a bunch, or was that because you were trying to listen to your performance in the setting of like impressing or fulfilling a requirement? Or do you know what I mean?
It was very much
Okay.
requirement driven, a requirement that I didn't believe in. I could have played it
So that's interesting that
musically
how
and
the
happily
listening
if I had my
is
score, but
affected by
I didn't.
another skill
So
that perhaps you haven't evolved. I'm terrible at memorizing and I don't do it, but that's interesting that the listening suffers because of another angle of musicianship isn't satisfied inside of your own, musicianship, I guess. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's an interesting point to push a little bit, because everyone has points in their music education where something that you know and love that works for you is pushed out of its comfort zone for the sake of growth. And it's especially interesting to think of when listening is pushed to the side, where it's like, well, you have to get better at playing. I'm not sure if that is optimal. I know it's a pedagogical strategy that I see all over the place, where it's like you're setting aside expression to get the technical per se. But it's interesting that maybe if it affects listening,
Yeah.
we could find a better solution.
I think that's
or
what
reinforce listening
I
more
think that's what I was
outside
kind
of
of getting
that.
at, was that the thought that I had, and I think that we all had the same music history course, the same professor who was teaching it. And for better,
Not I, because I work in
well,
marketing,
I'll
so I
dumb it
didn't get
down
that
then, Stephen.
education.
I'm kidding. So that was the only
Yes,
really, there was
please.
2 moments that I could come up with where I felt I was forced to listen to something a certain way, and that was during the music history course. And to be fair, it had its purpose, like you said. There's a technical thing that needed to be we needed to get through that, and we needed to fill those requirements. But I don't remember, like, we had to listen to certain figures of the time period, certain chord progressions, certain mechanisms, certain forms, all these things, certain licks, if you will, of the music thing. But because it was under the scope of education and fulfilling a requirement, I don't remember any of it. Like, I couldn't tell you sonata form or allegro form. I don't even know. I couldn't tell you any of that stuff. I know what an Alberti bass is now. I remember that, but I don't remember anything else from it. And I think that, and I think that to your point, I feel like there would be a better way around it. And I think it has something to do with to keeping finding instructors who can maintain a perspective for the student of why listening is important. Because I think that if we are forced to, if we are um, if we're supposed to fulfill a requirement educationally, and that's the reason we're paying money, we're getting a degree so that we can fulfill some requirements, whether that's the style of the teacher, the style of the school, the style of the curriculum, whatever it is, we're paying for that. And so, yes, there is a world for that, and it absolutely has to be a world for that to fulfill these requirements. But I wonder if then, if there is a mechanism or part of the curriculum that an instructor or professor can maintain to enhance perspective of why everything is happening, and and how they can teach listening as part of that curriculum to enhance the overall artistry of a musician. Does that make any sense at all?
No, I mean, it makes me think of I've heard my brother, William's brother, who's also a very prolific listener, talking about his, I don't know what they call it, whatever you call post-diatonic theory. And beginning of every class, I believe for the entire semester, they did the
Hmm.
same thing, which is let's listen to cloud chamber music. And it's this, out there piece that at the first time the class heard, they apparently were all befuddled by. And they listened to it again, like every day. So we're talking what, 14 times three? Uh, you know, by the end of the semester, they've listened to this nearly 50 times. And he said that at first he hated it, and then he, went through the stages of grief, and at the end he was like, "Wow, my professor was so passionate about this piece that his passion engendered some new kind of listening. Repeat listening was an important part of the experience in this case, where there was an educational, something to be learned and how they listen." But at the end, he's like, "Oh
Interesting.
wow, this is cool. I get it now. I wouldn't if I only listened the first time." But it was this teacher, this guide who was a bridge. It wasn't just listening by himself because he didn't know how to listen to this piece. Now, I might be mangling the story and making it up, but I'm pretty sure that's the truth. And he's not here to defend it. So, you know,
Well, it's interesting. I feel like what happens a lot of the time thinking about like music history class is that it's easy to set aside listening for the sake of something very measurable and discernible. And so it's like, oh, well, we've covered the material we need to cover. And I pointed out the important factors that I need to point out. And I haven't found anything in music that I would say is more foundational than listening. And so I kind of like the idea of pushing someone really hard to hear more than I like the idea of pushing hard to quantify more, to know more dates. Um,
hear a lot.
yeah, but to hear better, I've been playing around with this idea. It's like, what if we have that as the primary reason we study music? That we can hear better, that we can listen better, we can take in more. And I like that approach. And if you get narrow in what you're trying to give in a class, in a lesson, then I think you're not fostering listening as best you could. And so
No, it's interesting.
go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, I'm trying to remember which of the many Beethoven string quartets. I have to write a paper on one of the Beethoven string quartets, an analysis. And so I listened to this one movement of the quartet so many times that I should remember the opus number. But I remember the one part in the quartet that Beethoven suddenly changes rhythm. He inverts the rhythm from what he's done in the main motif, the rest of the quartet. And then I remember my other favorite part, which is this part where the first violinist's tone was just so wonderful. And as a violinist, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So, the first time I listened to it, I was listening and I was struck by, oh, wow, the violinist tone is so amazing. This is wonderful. And then after listening to it like 50 times or whatever for writing this paper, then I get to the part where the rhythm inverts, which took a different listening skill. And I was really excited about that part because suddenly I understood, oh, this is different. There's something cool happening here, you know? And now I can have these two favorite moments in the quartet. So I think it's an example that, again, whatever inheritance we have in listening when we first hear, or whatever we've developed by the last hearing of whichever piece, um, like it's possible, like the floor is lava song, for it to wear you down, but just as much on the other side, it's as we discover more, it's so possible to add to the listening experience only and still enjoy the same things that I listened with that first filter of how does the violin sound, you know? That was not diminished by
So
me
that's
suddenly
part
paying
of like
attention to the
the curriculum
rhythm
that you're developing, right,
in the
William?
later listening.
Like how to replicate that?
Very much. Give a pattern that helps expand listening, and listening opens up
Yeah,
what
because
you hear and what
I
you
I
take
think that
in.
that's
So
just how I
very
learned
much a
music
part of it.
growing up, was that I just hammered away at it. And so I feel like that if I was to develop a curriculum or follow a curriculum, I would probably do the same thing that um, your brother did, or the teacher did for the brother. I would probably just listen to it over and over and over until I heard stuff to it, and I'd probably get bored with it. But I just find it interesting that in a course in a classroom that wasn't about listening, just hammering it through developed it somehow. So I just found it interesting because that's the way that I approached learning music. So maybe I'm in need of a different curriculum.
Well, I think about the Russian Five,
Hmm.
who they didn't want to study composition the way it was being taught at the major conservatories. They're like, we're just gonna take the great composers and we're just gonna look at their music. We're just going to see what we see and take it for what we want. And I think there's a close connection to this idea about listening there, where it's like, let's go to the source material and see how meaningfully we can connect with that. And I think it is useful periodically, if not very often, to throw in something new to the curriculum to keep it alive. It's just
Yeah,
tough
because
to know
that could become
what
a very
that
personal
should
thing
be.
for a student.
Um,
And I mean, it's the job
so
of the professor, especially during private lessons, to figure out what drives, motivates, and creates passion with the student, and then teach them how to replicate that moment in lessons, like the really poignant moment in lessons. An individual teacher teaching an individual student should teach that student how to replicate that. So I wonder that, yeah, if what that is. I mean, that's not a question for here, but I'm just voicing that thought.
well, I will share this thought, that I think that approaching problem solving from a listening standpoint, I'm confident it could yield better results than I've seen. And I've been in a lot of voice lessons. I've been in a lot of wind lessons and string lessons. I've been in a lot of rehearsals.
Hmm.
That I think we try to solve everything from a performance aspect. And maybe it's just a listening aspect. Um, and wouldn't that be nice if, instead of making sure your fingers are 10% quicker and lightning fast and lightning accurate, it's like, maybe you just need to
You know what?
listen
That's
different.
interesting. That's interesting because today I was practicing
I
my
am
my
very
arrangement of the
curious.
Pathetique Sonata, so the rumba, the Latin version, and like I just have a lot of right hand tension all the time. It just builds and builds and builds and builds throughout the hour and a half, 2 hours that I'm practicing. Always does that. But there was a moment today where I was sitting there listening, and I have a chromatic run that's really fast, and then I have an F harmonic minor scale that changes to a C harmonic minor scale in one measure, and it's like at like and it's fast for me. So, but I was like, man, this I'm too what the heck is going on? This is ridiculous. And so then, like, honestly, this is not me trying to like plug the program or anything, but I was like, maybe I should listen to what the sounds are coming out of the piano instead of feeling what my hands are doing. Maybe I should just try it. And so I was doing that, and like tension went away, and I was able to play it smooth. Not up to tempo, but I was able to play it smooth. Whereas for the last 15 minutes, I was hammering away at it. So I'm not trying to like, you know, say you're a genius, even though I believe that you've gone to something really cool here. There is something to it. And like, so I found that even just the thought, and I don't even have your curriculum. I don't even remember what your pillars were. I don't remember what your filters were. I don't remember like, but just the thought of being in tune with the sound that's being produced from that instrument instead of focusing in on this instrument, I was able to use this instrument better. So that's really interesting.
I mean, it goes back to the thesis statement. How you listen determines what you hear, and what you hear determines how you feel and think. And there's plenty of neuroscience behind that, where it's like, oh yeah, um, it's a pretty continuous path from listening into feeling and thinking, and it's so nice um, to just, instead of saying you have to execute it better, just be like, let's change the whole filter, let's change the whole perception and see what that does. And I feel like that it's just so invigorating to say, well, the music will give you the answer to make the music better. And it always does if you know how to listen. But to start, you have to know what your choices are. I feel that's one of the biggest things that isn't always known. It's like, what are your choices when listening? Um, but once you can establish that, then
Yeah, I
you can
imagine
go
so.
somewhere, and you can
Yeah.
go somewhere really quickly. And so, yeah, I'm very interested in seeing the pedagogical implications of approaching performance challenges in music from a listening standpoint. So I think we've pretty well answered the second part of this question. I was going to say, what advice would you give to a musician who didn't know how to choose, who didn't know how to hear differently? They're like, no, I'm hearing the same thing. And I've had many failures in this regard, where I was trying to help someone capture the essence of the music, hear it and feel it, and I would explain it to them, and they just, give me the "you have lobsters crawling out of your ears." They're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I'm like, we are not hearing the same thing. So, and any thoughts on that?
I have a thought. I mean, I think of supplementing listening with other engagements with the music, some that we could call sort of non-listening engagements. And I think there's something that can be at least a little paradigm shifting about this. So think of someone like Liberace, watching them play something, watching, not even listening necessarily, but watching, and or Ling Ling, or and you might see them make these wonderful smile in ways that seem so genuine and excited about what they're playing. Whether they are, I don't know, but they look so happy when they're playing. Um, and then you look at someone like Jascha Heifetz playing the violin, and he makes about two faces when he plays. There's this face and there's this face. Yeah, and that's about it. And he makes a ton of different sounds, but by just, if you compare the difference of watching him play to someone like Joshua Bell, it's a really different experience. And you start to get a sense of how do they interpret this music? Uh, how do they emote in connection with this music? And so I feel like this sort of non-listening analysis of how other people emote about the music in different recordings of it, different iterations of it, can be really instructive to show, oh, he's not hearing what he's hearing, or she's hearing something totally different. Um, and then I think the same thing can happen when you do analysis, another sort of semi non-listening way to engage with the music. Like if you literally are just looking at the score, whether you're hearing it in your mind or not. But I think these sort of non-listening exercises can be very mind-opening to, there's something there that someone else hears. Somebody in the world enjoys the Schumann violin concerto. I don't, but someone gets really excited and cries as they play it. Um, and that gives me
Mm.
pause to say, well, maybe I should listen again. Maybe I should try to listen a different way.
Yeah, to me, this kind of captures um the exploratory filter to a degree, where it's like, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm looking for something that I haven't encountered. You never know what you're going to find when you genuinely start exploring. And that's a good measure to see if you really are exploring. It's like, I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know what's out there. And exploring outside of just the strict listening, I think is
Yeah,
a
because
really
if I
interesting
can I interrupt? Is that okay?
idea.
The I think that's a wild point you're making, Stephen,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I had never thought of before. Um, there was a moment in time where I would practice with headphones on, listening to something completely different from what I'm playing, so that I couldn't hear what I was playing. And I don't know if it made me better. I don't know if it made me worse. I don't know. I was just exploring. I don't even know. There's no point to that story aside from I wonder if like to be so stupid about it, like isn't listening just observation with the ears? Isn't that what it is? I mean, there's a ton of like information. There's a ton of like um, steps it needs to go through. There's a ton of like filters inside that you need to get through. But like seeing is observing. We talk all the time about observing with our eyes, like be more observant, or like, and then there's the emotional observance, like you should just be more observant about someone's feelings. So I don't know what the finalization of this thought is, but I wonder if there's a world where you start with the observation and then move the observation to different facets or aspects or different organs of your body. And maybe that can enhance the listening experience. Like if you were to go ahead, Stephen. Yeah.
No, I mean, we all had, the professor who would film nearly everything
Yeah.
to have you watch yourself sing, not just listen to yourself sing, but watch yourself. And then I had a cello instructor before I played violin,
Oh.
who she would have me practice in utter darkness. You know, either with blindfolded, turn off all the lights, something like that. And her request is make sure you cannot see anything, so that you can only listen. And that was one of her techniques. Among many, there were other more abstract ones. Use this math to determine, based on when you were born, how you will engage with the music. These are really different ways to engage with it, but it did bring
And I think that if you
a
have
unique
multiple
observational
angles,
experience.
and because it's music, like we're already going to be listening at all times. Like, even if you're ignoring it or not, we're listening. We have to. I mean, it's just kind of the nature of music. But I think to your point, William, and what you want to be doing with this thing is that maybe if there's multiple angles that encourage or enhance the practice of listening, all the better to use them, you know? But with that end point in mind, with the end point, we should hear and react to what we're creating by the way that we hear it. And if we're hearing something different that we don't like, then we should eh, do something different and then repeat that process. Listen, produce, listen, produce, listen, produce.
It brings up one of the problems that I've been encountering with the research is I talk about these four filters and I talk about them through listening. But a lot of people, when we start talking about them, they're like, but it's more than just listening. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it applies in a lot of other ways. But I only feel confident enough to definitively talk
Well,
about
like
listening.
one
So
thing that I
I'm
had
sticking
mentioned
with
before,
listening
in like one of our
for
first ones,
now.
I said that
But
this curriculum that you're
No, but
creating is not meant to throw away anything. It's not meant to get rid of traditions. It's not meant to get rid of any abstract practices. It's not meant to replace anything. It's just meant to create something different and another angle in which to improve your part of your musicianship. And I believe that, like, if you look at it from an actor's point of view, an actor has to tap into the depths or whatever. I don't like how actors tap into their trauma or anything. I don't like that. But in order for an actor to create something that is just poignant and visceral and life changing, they need to go inside. And I think that part of your curriculum encourages musicians to go inside to then create from their own artistry and not the one that the education has set up for them, or a teacher has set up for them, or the curriculum has set up for them. I think that I think you're onto something that encourages true artistic development, not just um, not just educational development or curriculum development or practice development or fingering development.
Well, that is, yeah, the goal. And I have had to focus primarily on that side, and I had to give a name to that educational development because you get it at universities. This is originally built and is primarily intended for trained musicians. And, I think the problem is, bringing it back to choice, is that they're generally given two choices out of what I think is four when it comes to how you can approach music. And it's like, well, you could approach it through analysis, or you could be critical about it. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it better? Is it worse? And it's like, they do have to know that they can choose to reach inside. And yeah, when the thinking side, the analytical and critical, is so reinforced, I think there's a real danger of losing that ability to reach inside. You can't
I
choose
agree.
that as readily as you can choose to analyze and critique because it's not practiced, it's not as codified in the system, and so then you are restricted in your hearing, which as a musician, that's a catastrophe. That's so bad. And so you need to know how to hear as fully as possible. Well, yeah, sure hope this doesn't take away from anything, and it's not to, I don't know, I not to toot my own horn, but I think that listening is more foundational than performing in connecting with music. But musicians who study aren't taught that, I don't think. I think they're taught that performance is the best way to connect. And there's something about performing. You connect with music unlike any other way. But the best is when you can perform and really hear what you're doing.
Well,
Uh,
no, it's like you've talked about politics of music departments of, you know, who gets the best offices in the music faculty, and it's the performance instructors, right? The performers themselves. Who gets the worst? It's probably the people who teach music appreciation, oral
Or
skills,
just plain old
music theory.
adjunct.
You know, so we
yeah.
no, but um, it makes me think of William and I were trading texts. I shared a video of Berlin
Oh,
Philharmonic conducted by Gustav Dudamel. And, if you know Dudamel, he's a showman, not just a hear man, a showman. He wants it to look exciting. And Berlin Philharmonic, that's not what they are known for. But they're doing also Sprach Zarathustra, doing the famous opening. And when you have the big cymbal crash near the end, the cymbal player is sitting down until the crash suddenly jumps up, does the crash, almost falls over because he came to his feet so suddenly. But it's like, okay, probably everybody in the audience knew this was coming. They probably did not know that him jumping up was coming,
Yeah.
and that surprise alone made me at least listen to the piece in a different way. A piece I've heard, many, many times and played multiple times. So I think anything that can spur surprise to break you out of what you were talking about, William, being stuck in listening, I think anything that can spur a surprise uh, is a helpful way to get out of that and to start making choices. There was I don't know if it's like lasting value, if that's going to be enough to keep you listening fresh, but just that little note of, oh, this is different. This is not what the Berlin Phil usually does. I think those little things can sometimes be enough to change your mind and your direction to have a new listening experience.
And it's interesting. I feel like our listening tends to turn off if we encounter something that we don't like. this seems to be a fairly common um, experience, thinking about popular songs that are performed live or arrangements of video game music are the two examples that come to mind. People listen to this arrangement and then it doesn't have something that they really like in the original and they're like, well,
Same.
I don't like it.
Guilty.
Or it's like, "Well, I am too. I am too." Instead of, kind of embracing like this exploration and listening. It's like, I don't know what I'm gonna find in here, but I know it's based on a Uematsu track I love. So let's go see. Instead of looking for, oh, this is the best part in the Uematsu track. Is it the best part in this recording? I mean, they're just a choice before you listen can make all the difference in your experience. That ties in perfectly to the next question. How has choosing your mode of listening changed your musical experience? And I'm wondering if
You
there are any
know, William, I'll
specifics
share the one that
that
I
either of you
shared,
want to share.
I think the last time we recorded something, but the recital we did together. And now, what do you mean by mode of listening? Just to make sure I can accurately.
You could say
Okay.
filter.
Okay.
You could say just general approach. You chose, I'm walking into this or gonna listen this
So
way.
when we did our
There was some
recital together
intentionality.
before I left, before we separated, or not that we were like, before we parted ways, we're never going to see each other again. I played that was it a nocturne or the prelude, the Chopin, the prelude in E minor. Like,
The
I
Chopin Prelude, E
specifically
minor.
didn't. I played through it like once or twice just to make sure that my hands were there. And that was a conscious choice that I made because, again, I thought to myself, well, William will want me to like listen to my performance, not someone else's performance. I know that's not like completely accurate. I know that's not what you're preaching. But I was like, I've heard it done. It's one page. It's what, 32 bars, 24 bars. I don't even remember. It's really short. So, so like,
Even I can
and
play
I had
that
made
one.
mistakes in there,
True story.
but when I played it, this has never happened to me. This is like maybe I can count on one hand how many times this has happened to me, but like I started tearing up at the piano at a performance. And it was because, and I thought it was really special to me. Maybe, and you told me it was different and I was fine by me. And I'm sure that you had other critiques and other enjoyments about it. And I'm sure, what's his name? Who was in the audience, his church, McCorkle. I'm sure that Dr. McCorkle had his own opinions about it too. But for me, that was a very special experience because I listened to the sound that I was creating and the filter of my hands that I usually have, I didn't worry about. And so that freed me up to just produce something from myself. And for me, choosing that mode of simply one, not listening to anybody else, only practicing it enough to make sure that I have it under my fingers without going beyond it, without having technical prowess, without having analytical prowess or critical thought prowess. Without any of that, I went into it with that mechanism, that mode of just listening. And for me, it made a big difference in that piece. I've tried to recreate it, can't do it. So I've given up. I don't want to anymore because I just keep on getting frustrated. That performance for me was phenomenal and I can't reproduce it. So for me, that changed for me a big way of how I approached like perhaps other beautiful songs I would perform.
Well, that ties into another question later that I kind of want to go to, but I also want to hear Steven's thoughts about the question we had about, how you can keep choosing. And I'll just put in this little bookmark. I feel like one of the biggest mistakes performing musicians make is they find something that works and then they try to do that every single time. In different settings, in different halls with different collaborators, different days, they're different. It's like you found on a day the right choice. And I think in that recital, you found the right choice beyond, an objective measure. It's like, no, that was the right way for you to play it. And you can measure that by your feeling, your experience. But when else are you going to be back in that church with that piano, with those people
That's
in
true.
that frame of mind, with me playing the other part of their side? It's like, it's all going to be different. And so embracing that as a listener and a performer, I think is
So would you say, like,
freeing, and I
this
think
is my
really,
question because
really
I genuinely
important.
want to know, would you say um put put that as a pearl, put it on the necklace, and then carry it for the rest of your life? Or would you say put that as a pearl, put it on your necklace, and then like try to like replicate something similar?
I would say put that
Yeah,
as
can
a
I?
pearl. Sorry. Put it on your necklace and keep it there till you have a better pearl.
Please.
Yeah, if I may, I mean,
Mm.
this ties very much into the answer I was going to give to this third big question. So can I go on a little tangent first?
Absolutely.
Well, actually, I'll make my statement first. My view of this is like, if music happens in time, the only way to have a musical experience is to be present. And I think that's what you're talking about, Patrick, is this moment, this sense of presence, and what you're talking about, William, of it's now. It's not, you're not going to have that same now again. You're going to have some other now, but not that one. So here's the tangent. If either of you have ever read the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, there's a little interesting thing about music. Tiny little thing about music in one of the first few chapters where main character is on this motorcycle road trip through the country. He stops because he hears something rattling that shouldn't be rattling in his bike. Stops, takes it to a shop. The shop is all noisy. They're listening to music. They're talking to each other as they look at his bike. And they look at his bike and say, okay, we got it fixed. Go on. He drives on. When he gets to a certain speed, he hears the rattling again. He's like, well, I'm not taking it back there. So he goes to a different shop. This next shop he gets to, no music, no banter. It is silent. And they go and look at his bike, and they quickly find out the actual issue, which was just a loose piece of hardware inside somewhere. They're able to fix it. It's a small thing. But if I remember correctly, it would have been a big thing if he didn't fix it. Like, could have been, a lot of expense to repair if he didn't do it quickly. And so as the last time I was on the podcast, takes me back to literature, quote from Ursula Le Guin, to hear one must be silent. And so these people, they're not listening to music. They're not listening to each other. They're listening to the bike. And that's when they hear what they need to hear and find what they need to find. They're very present. They're not distracted. So when it comes to like, how do you, now I'm trying to remember your actual question.
Continuously
William.
choose to active
Let me look at
listening.
my little list here. Continuously choose actively listening. It's like, yeah, you have to
Interesting.
continually choose to reject some other
Interesting.
things. You have to choose to be present at the expense of some other things. So that means for me, I can't just listen while I'm at work. I need to go to a concert once in a while, or I can't just listen while I'm mowing the lawn. Like, I have to just listen sometime, or maybe it's even not just listen to music. Maybe it's I just have to listen to this part of the music, this voice in the texture. But that element of being present and being able to safeguard yourself against other voices and other distractions. I think, well, no wonder they heard something new, and then the people in the first
That's
shop
interesting.
didn't
If
hear
I
it,
if I can
because
jump
they
in,
were
William,
trying to
really
listen
quick,
to
is that
too many
okay?
things at once.
Because like I'm not arguing with you, Stephen. That was like profound, and I love it. I was writing stuff down. That's why I was looking during your story, not because it was just not boring, but it was a. Okay, no, but like
William can
in
cut it.
jazz,
So
the greatest players in jazz are the people who have listened to everybody, all as many people as they can, because that builds their foundation of language for when they improvise on their own. And so I find it an interesting dichotomy that sometimes at the expense of, or like tuning out other things, and I don't think this is what you're saying. I don't think you're saying like, don't listen to this, don't listen to this, don't listen to this, so that you can make sure that you're creating yourself your own thing. Um, I just found it really interesting that the greatest players in jazz are the ones that have listened to the most people and who have um, disregarding themselves, I guess, like at their own for their own, they listen to everyone else sacrificing their own needs or their own from the outside it would seem like they're sacrificing their own artistry because they don't produce stuff until they feel like they've accumulated enough information. And obviously that's not true. Jazz musicians are always practicing stuff, but like I just find it interesting that um on the other on maybe like not the other side of the coin, but like the other half of your side of the coin is simply just listening and not doing anything else, and replicating what you hear and like reproducing what you hear so that you can then make your own decisions in real time or make your own decisions in creation of that art, if that makes sense.
Like William, like you were talking about, if it's that foundational listening before you perform, or if listening is a foundation to performing, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, Patrick. But yeah, it's like uh when you've heard so many things, uh, you'll have this
Yeah.
repository of stuff you can
And I
draw
think it's the same
on,
for
you know.
classical or
Um,
any other musical
but
genre.
the
The greats are the people who have the vocabulary. And that's simply a matter of listening. If you want to speak any language correctly, you got to listen. Sure, there's some study involved, but you got to listen.
No, this also speaks to me of this connection between thinking and
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
feeding each other and unlocking each other incrementally all the way to the top. Because Stephen, you're talking about presence. How do you continually choose? And I'm like, you need some moments. You need to know how to have just a moment with the music where it's like, oh, this is just the music affecting me. And I'm pretty convinced that to be fully in the moment with the music requires you to engage with it via feeling. Thinking offers more and more to that experience. And in my conversations with other musicians, they've talked about how optimal listening is not slapping on one filter and just riding it for an hour. Maybe sometimes that's how it'll work, but it's going between filters, knowing when to use each one to unlock it. I was thinking of a listening experience I had. I got to hear Richard Elliott play at TCU, phenomenal organist. And I was stuck in thinking. And I've heard Richard Elliott since I was a kid. And I'm like, I'm not feeling it. What's going on? This performance isn't something special yet. But I realized I was taking organ lessons. I was analyzing, I was watching, I was critiquing. And I was able to find this moment where something tweaked and I tapped into another filter that added to the ones I had going. And suddenly it became a transcendent experience. Whereas like I was there and the music was in me. I wasn't just observing it from afar through analysis and critique. And so it is so important. I feel like if you want to keep choosing, I would say as a foundational idea, the four filters are a really, really good starting place, because if the experiential isn't working, try some analysis, try some critique, or try some exploration. You have options that you can jump between that are integrally connected to each other and will always feed each other. And so if you're like, I really need to feel this music, some days maybe you need to start with analysis, and some days maybe you need to start with critique. I don't know. But having those four kind of pillars, those four basic offerings, I think, is a good way to troubleshoot when you
You know,
don't know
William,
how to listen or don't know what to
I'm
choose.
think I'm beginning to understand all your stuff, all of this. So this has been this is good. This is good. I'm glad to be here. I think I'm starting to get like I'm all about like application. If someone's going to philosophize or philosophize, I don't know, theorize, whatever. If someone's going to be cerebral, if it's spiritual about something, or about like, or cerebral about it, and if I can't see an application, then I tend to tune it out, just because like that's just how I am. I don't know. I need to work on it. I know. Thank you, Stephen. but I but I wrote that
My
down
boring
because I saw
motorcycle
the
story.
application, just so you know. But like this is starting to make sense to me, and
Okay, I'm
I'll
glad.
need to reread some of the stuff that you sent me before, because I think that there is more merit than what I'm giving it credit. So take that as you will.
Okay, well, I mean, it leads into a part two of this question that I think is actually a pretty good place to close up. I don't think we'll get to everything tonight, but this is I think a pretty good place to close up. What happens if you don't choose your mode of listening?
Well, you know, I think that there's two in my mind. Just now, two things came. One was that like you can experience something phenomenal. Maybe it's just going to be that day where the muses smile down and just like shower you with absolute like beauteousness. Yeah,
Or maybe you're
maybe. And so
hearing
then the other
Hillary
side is
Hahn
that
live that day.
you start to develop a disliking of whatever that thing that you're listening to. You want to come back to it another day, and then you're like, I already tried it. Something else. So those are the two things that like say I Gustavo Dudamel's Mambo number 8 or 5 or whatever.
No,
The first time I heard it, because he's a showman, but like the first time I heard it, I had described to William how like the trumpets were just like the rhythm that the trumpets were playing were just off with the triplet to give it a laid back feel in conjunction and against the driving rhythm, and that's what made the style like pop. But then I go back to listen to it another day, and I'm like, wasn't the same. And then I'm like, I'll try it again. And then I get back another day, wasn't the same. I'll try again. And then the next time I'm like, okay, moving on, something else.
well, I imagine we've all had the experience of a piece that we love that we are listening to and realizing we
Mm,
haven't at some point realizing,
yeah,
oh, I wasn't paying attention for a few minutes. I don't actually remember digesting this, you know? I don't know if I've had that a lot of times, even
Yeah,
pieces I
yeah.
love, where it's like, I don't remember the last 5 minutes of my life. And I feel like that's one of the things that can happen too is, uh, if we're not listening actively, that we just lose some time. And maybe that's fine, especially if this is listening in a casual way, in a way that's, like again, listening while I work or do something else. Maybe that's fine. But if you want to be present and if you want to have all these amazing engagements with music, um, if you're missing 10% or 20% because your mind was somewhere else, I think it's going to be a lot harder to have the few
yeah.
moments
And go ahead, William. I'm
of
sorry.
illumination and wonder during it.
And I was just gonna say, I do get a little concerned, especially in today's environment, that we can practice, I guess I want to call it vulnerable listening in kind of the worst way. I generally think of vulnerability as a good thing, but the attitude where it's like, it's up to the music to transform me. And it's like, well, you enter a relationship with the music. You have to let it in. You have to bring it in. And if you only say, well, I only like music that it just moves me, then how much are you missing out on? And how much wonderful stuff is just going right by, and kind of like your experience, Patrick, where you're like, oh, not today. Well, maybe there's
That is.
nothing there. And that, I think, is a tragedy, when something that is there but we didn't listen to it, and then all of a sudden we say there's nothing there.
Can I share one more philosophizing?
Yes, please.
So just last night I watched this movie, The Life of Chuck, based on a Stephen King novella. And there's this scene where there's this Juilliard dropout drummer busking, and she's just playing just her trap set out on the street. Tom Hiddleston's character, who is an accountant, walks by, and for some reason he just starts dancing, and he's not really sure why. And he just dances up a storm. There's this other girl who's walking by. She starts dancing. They dance together. They have this wonderful moment. The audience suddenly an audience starts forming. There was no audience before. The drummer starts doing new things because she's performing with other people. The audience starts doing new things, and everybody has this magical moment. Now, this is fictional, but then after this, the drummer's like, "Hey, why did you start dancing?" And he's like, "I don't know." Like, he's at a conference, he's just walking by, this wasn't planned, but somehow he's just present there in the moment and starts engaging with music, and has this wonderful experience. You find out through the course of the movie some other possible reasons, but you never get this explanation of why did it happen there? Why did the magic work right there? Um, but the point is that it did, and you had to be there. And if you weren't there, it's like you can't just go out and busk again and hope it's going to work. The drummer's like, we could make a living. We should go do this. The three of us, we should go into business together. And he's kind of like, no, I don't. That's going to work. And I think he's right that again, fictional, but like you can't guarantee that magic. But if you never try, if you don't
Steve,
show up,
that's
then of
so
course it's not going to
that
happen.
was kind of a comment that I was going to make, and that's so like divine, if you will. I'll give you a compliment, I guess. But the one of my favorite books is the War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. If y'all haven't read that, definitely recommend it. Um, he wrote he wrote a few screenplays like Legend of Bagger Vance and others that are just really popular and made him a lot of money. And he is of the opinion, which and I agree. Stephen, going back to your music is time, and what I find beautiful about music is that when you perform it, you're putting the audience and ourselves into a different you're putting ourselves into an alternate reality where time moves differently. And so, like Steve, what you were saying, that music moves in its own time, and so the key is to be present. And Stephen Pressfield, he says that art is divinely inspired all the time. It's always divinely inspired. I don't always agree with that, but I do believe that if I can get a little bit spiritual here, a little bit theoretical, I guess, that if time is only measured unto man, and music is measured, and we measure that, men, us, human beings, what is music going to be like in the heavens? So, and if music is different there, and if geniuses here have moments of just like glory and compose things that are just phenomenally and can never be composed again, like Debussy or whoever, then is it something divine, that's something out of time that's giving them that information? And if that's the case, or if it's not the case, Stephen and William, to your points, is that if you're not putting in the effort, how can you ever hope to receive something that could be divine? Or how can you ever hope to receive something from the deepest parts of your soul if you're not putting in the effort to be there? And so Stephen Pressfield, to the point, no matter what, he goes into his office that's separated from everything. 4 hours a day, he just puts in the work. Doesn't matter what it is. 4 hours a day, he puts in the work. And if the muses happen to smile upon him that day, then it's a good day. If it's not, if they don't smile upon him, then it's still a good day because he put in the work. That's his perspective that he keeps. And so I think that with listening and with practicing and with anything that you do with music, that if you're not putting in the work, and if you're not trying to access an alternate reality, which listening, I feel, as what I've been experiencing, listening helps you get into this alternate reality to receive, either from above or from inside, some genuine like pearls that you can reproduce or produce. And so I think if you're not putting in that effort, then you can never hope to produce something that is um, phenomenal or fulfilling, or you know what I mean?
And I think it's fair to say that listening
Yeah.
can be as much work as practicing. Um, at least in the I don't know, maybe in the short term, maybe not in the long term, but I don't know.
No, I've been trying to keep up this practice where it's only 15 minutes a day. That's what I try to hold myself to, where I'm mostly or wholly focused just on listening. And it waxes and wanes if I don't keep it up. It's harder to get what I want out of my listening. But if I do keep it up, it comes more easily. And, one of the experiences that I think is generally held as like this remarkable standard that you just have to wait for the muses to smile on you for is when time ceases to exist. You don't know. You're the time barrier is distorted, in the words of one artist. But I think that if you know how to balance feeling and thinking, that you can tap into that so much more. I don't think you have to be kind of vulnerable just waiting for the music to finally change your life. And so you listen each day and hope it'll change your life today. I think you can take charge of that, but you have to know what your choices are, and you have to know which choice to make when it comes to listening. Otherwise, you're shooting in the dark. You'll go to school and they'll tell you, well, maybe if you perform this way, or maybe if you do it this way. But yeah, unless you have all four filters, and I feel like the university really presents two, then
I love
you're going to
that
be vulnerable in a
because
way
that'll
that I don't
produce
think
the
you want to
artistry
be.
that teachers actually want. I mean, they want their students to be good. At least I hope that they do. I do for my students. But like being vulnerable enough to discover your artistry, that's for the greats. It always seemed like that's for the greats. But William, I really think that like with what you're doing, I think that can be more accessible for the average Joe like me, you know? So I'm excited for it.
Well, that's the hope. Yeah, stay tuned, everyone. Next week, I'll be giving a
Good
presentation
luck.
at UNCG on this. That'll serve as a pretty good introduction, I would say, to a lot of the core ideas if you aren't familiar with all of them. And as always, feel free to check out the Approaches to Listening website. There will be a link in the description. It has a previous podcast, blog entries, and some other products, a community page you can join to discuss listening with other listeners. A lot of resources there, that with the goal of helping people connect to music better than they've known how to connect. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Patrick. It's always great to hear your thoughts, even if Stephen
Yeah.
makes fun of me some. But Patrick was here to make fun of Stephen, so it worked out great.
It balances out.
But thanks, and yeah, hope to catch everyone on the next podcast episode.